Hello and welcome to Common Sense from God. You know, it's always a good thing to recognize where the source of the power come from. Now, you have homes and you can fool yourself all you want to that the light fixtures are shining because of your power. Everybody knows that the light fixtures are shining because of a particular light company that you have your service with. You recognize the reason the lights come on, not because you have any power, but because the power has been put in the walls and the light company, where the source of the power is, turns on the power. This is the message that you must understand as a Christian, that the power that you have, if you got power, the power does not belong to you. I believe that's what the Apostle Paul was talking about in 1 Corinthians, the 2nd chapter. It's a beautiful chapter because it's Paul again emptying himself out, recognizing where the power comes from. He says, I don't want any of the credit. Paul starts out by saying, and brethren, when I came to you, I came not with excellence of speech or wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. Now, it is not like Paul didn't have worldly wisdom. He was an educated man. But Paul wants to establish something. The kingdom of heaven is not about your education. Now, God can use your education. God can use your wisdom that you have gleaned from this world. But that particular wisdom and knowledge is not what saves souls. I believe this is where Paul is coming from. He says, I came to you not with excellence of speech. In other words, Paul says, I can use big words too. In other words, I have a thesaurus in my mind that I can kick out big words to impress you. He said, but that's not my thing. I'm not coming with excellence of speech and wisdom, declaring unto you the testimony of God. It ain't going to do you no good. He continues. He says, for I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and him crucified. Now, I don't think Paul was saying he didn't have any knowledge. He's saying, but the main topic that I need to be focusing on is Jesus Christ and him him crucified. Now, what is it that gets you to heaven? Jesus says there ain't but one way to get to heaven. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes unto the Father but by me. Paul says you are saved by grace, through faith, none of yourself, that anyone could boast. You have been imparted this righteousness because of the shed blood and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Paul says, I determined to know nothing save Jesus Christ and him crucified. In other words, Paul says the most important message that you need to glean from me is that I'm talking about the life, the burial, the life, the death, the burial, and the resurrection and the ascension of Jesus Christ. He's seated at the right hand of the Father. Death could not hold him. So when I want talking to you, Paul says, I want to talk about Jesus Christ, him crucified. And when I was with you, he says, I was in weakness and in fear and much trembling. Now, I don't know, it's been a lot of interpretations of this. When Paul said he was in weakness, I think Paul says, I was revealing my weaknesses, recognizing that me and of myself is not going to do you any good. I was weak and I was fearful because God has imparted such a magnificent task he's bestowed on me. So I was trembling, making sure that I was behaving myself in a way that was not embarrassment to Christ. He says, and my speech and my preaching was not with enticing words of man's wisdom, but demonstration of the spirit of power. Paul says, it ain't like I don't got any wisdom, but I'm not trying to entice you, trying to impress you what Paul knows. Paul said it ain't about Paul. Just like it wasn't about Saul. I thought it was about Saul. I met my match on my way to Damascus. Paul saying, when I came to you, it ain't like I can't use enticing words to persuade you like many of the other teachers is doing. But he says, I didn't do that. He said, I was trying to put a demonstration of the Spirit and the power of the Spirit. He goes on to say that your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but the power of God. That's the key. See, some people want to get you thinking that they're saving you. They want to get you some knowledge, so then they want to take all the credit. Paul said, I don't need the credit because it ain't about me. It's about the Holy Spirit working in me, talking about Jesus in order to renew your mind so that you will put your faith in Jesus Christ. I believe this is what Paul is saying. Paul says the power does not come from me. In other words, the light company, the light source happens to be in heaven. And if you can get plugged into him, you too can have this wisdom. You can have this power. Howbeit, he says, we speak wisdom among them that are perfect. In other words, them who are mature. Yet not the wisdom of this world, nor the princes of this world that come to naught. Paul says, when we get amongst mature believers, we speak about this wisdom. He says we speak about this knowledge of the wisdom that we're talking about, but we don't want to get you puffed up. You got to be a little bit more mature, because then you'll start putting your faith in the Paul instead of your faith in the Jesus. Somebody needs some help right there. Don't put your faith in any man, not me or any other man, no preacher, nobody else. There's nothing wrong with you having a respect for your pastor, a respect for a man of God, a woman of God. But when you start putting your faith into everything they say and you don't actually listen to the Holy Spirit sometimes, because they're not perfect. Paul says, I don't want you putting your faith in the Paul. I want you putting your faith in the Jesus Christ. That's how you're going to become mature. Then Paul goes on and says, which none of the princes of this world knew, for if they had known, they would have not crucified the Lord of glory. That's the message that Paul is getting. The only reason they crucified Jesus, he says, because they didn't understand the wisdom, the knowledge. They was not imparted with the Holy Spirit. So therefore, they carried out the work of their father, the devil. The message that we want to make clear to you today is that wisdom is okay. Worldly knowledge is okay, but that ain't the knowledge that's going to save you. God can use the knowledge that you glean from this world, whether it be your education or a skill, but don't you think for 1 minute that God needs you, and don't you think for 1 minute that you should be trying to get the credit that is due to God. Paul says, I must decrease and he must increase. In other words, Paul is saying that it ain't about Paul. It's always about Jesus. He says, if you make it about Jesus, the wisdom of this world don't mean that much to you. Allow the Holy Spirit to work through you so God can get the glory. People can be saved and they can focus their attention on Jesus Christ. Period. End of discussion. That's the message Paul wants you to understand.